Right now on Morning News Now, fiery face-off. 5 presidential hopefuls discussing policy and talking trash in last night's third GOP debate.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case, we've got 2 of them on stage tonight.
But is any of it enough to put a dent in Republican frontrunner Donald Trump's lead? We'll take you to Miami for highlights and analysis. Also this morning, an intensifying fight. Israel stepping up its ground offensive in Gaza and sending troops further south while the border crossing with Egypt closes, leaving civilians stranded and humanitarian aid stuck. And negotiations underway to pause for fighting for up to 3 days. We'll bring you the latest. Plus, we have a deal. A 4-month actor strike is coming to an end. What we know about a deal just reached between SAG-AFTRA and major Hollywood studios. And finally, he was one of K-pop's biggest names, but after 10 years of success, he gave it up to focus on himself. I'll share my conversation with Eric Nam, who's opening up about his mental health journey and going independent as an artist. Conversation I'm very excited to bring you in. It's a big news morning today.
Exactly. A lot going on. Good morning. Good to have you with us on this Thursday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We get started, of course, in Miami, where the leading Republican presidential contenders took part in a third primary debate, which you saw right here on NBC News Now.
Once again, the frontrunner in the GOP field, former President Trump, opted not to take part. Instead, he hosted a rally just outside of Miami. The pressure was on for the 5 candidates who are trying to win over Republican voters on a night that was dominated by foreign policy topics like Israel, China, and Ukraine, along with questions about the man who was not in the room. Here are a few of the highlights.
We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you.
You know, everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now.
I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country. Right, and it needs to be said plainly.
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It's a cancer in the Republican establishment.
I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future. Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies matter.
You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
First, like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
All right, let's dive deeper into the debate. NBC News correspondent Maura Barrett is in Miami. Senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen joins us, too. Good morning to both of you. So, Maura, let's start with you. Which topics did get the most airtime, and how did the candidates try to separate themselves from each other?
Well, separating themselves was a key mission of the night and an effort to get any sort of leg up on former President Trump. Candidates sharpening their attacks on the Republican frontrunner. DeSantis, for example, putting blame on Trump for what he called Republican losses on election night earlier this week. It was also a debate heavy on foreign policy and an opportunity for candidates to differentiate on their positions around abortion, which was obviously something we were looking to see talked about after those Republican losses on Tuesday. I wanted to hear about how some of those conversations played out on stage.
We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different.
As much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that.
It was my home state of Ohio. I'm upset about this yesterday. That passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing.
Now, the topic of abortion is going to be one that the party as a whole is going to have to come to terms with, figure out where they're going to line up to attract voters as the primary season continues. But overall, this debate provided an opportunity, especially compared to those last debates, for candidates to really have time to lay out their stances, have some substantive conversations. And while there were some fireworks, there was less opportunity for those direct attacks and arguments on stage, guys.
John, let's bring you in here. As expected, the war between Israel and Hamas was a big topic of the night. And there was more agreement among the candidates here. What can you tell us?
Savannah, good morning. There was significant agreement from the candidates on Israel's desire and ability and their desire and ability for Israel to be able to defend itself. There's, of course, some variation there among the candidates in terms of what the U.S. role should be. But largely what you heard from these candidates was that Israel should be empowered by the United States, or certainly supported by the United States in its efforts to eliminate Hamas.
Maura, our eyes are often drawn to the fireworks. There was one particular moment between two of the candidates getting a lot of attention, came out of a discussion about TikTok. Break it down for us. What happened there?
Well, guys, prior to the debate, we had heard from Ramaswamy's team that he was going to be unconstrained on stage, and that's exactly what we saw. A lot of his focus falling on Nikki Haley, and that's where we saw this bit of altercation kind of play out on stage. He brought up a criticism that Haley had brought up on the stage last time, talking about criticizing him for using TikTok despite its ties to China. I want you to hear how that played out after that.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign on TikTok. How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it. And that's actually the point. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer.
You can just hear the frustration from Haley calling him scum on stage there. And Haley, after the debate, telling our team at NBC that she is a mom. She is always going to protect her family. But ultimately, she does have serious personal differences with Vivek Ramaswamy. And let's face it, he really had to make some splashes, waves on stage to really stand out, attempt to get those spikes in polling after the debate, those donor spikes as well. And that's the case for him, Chris Christie, and Tim Scott if they're going to want to make the debate stage next month, guys.
And John, we know the former president was not physically in the room, though he was discussed quite a bit on the stage. But tell us, Trump did held this counter-programming event not far from Miami. Quickly tell us about that.
Yes, Savannah, he did that in Hialeah, not so far away, an area with a significant Latino population. Trump is very happy with what he believes is some momentum for him among Latino voters. Look, he's in a place here where he's still dominating the field. He, looms over any of these debates, third straight debate that he has skipped. And until it appears that until one of these other candidates really threatens him, he's going to leave the debate alone and let them fight it out from second place.
All right. John and Maura, thank you both for kicking us off this hour. We appreciate it.
And now let's get to the latest in the $250 million civil fraud trial against Donald Trump, his sons, and their family business. Trump's eldest daughter, Ivanka, testified yesterday, saying she was not involved in her father's financial statements, which are at the heart of Attorney General Letitia James' case.
Ivanka was the fourth member of the Trump family to testify in the case after two of her brothers and, of course, her father. She was originally a co-defendant but was dismissed from the case earlier this year.
For more, we're joined by MSNBC anchor Lindsay Reiser. She is here on set where it is warm, not the courthouse. We're happy to have you with us. So the prosecution wrapped up its examination of Ivanka. Now it's the defense's turn. What were your big takeaways from what we saw yesterday?
Stylistically, she was totally different from her father, who we saw on Monday. I mean, the atmosphere in that courtroom was tense on Monday. It was much more relaxed yesterday, and she was much more polite, dare I say cooperative. I mean, she kept saying, I don't recall. We'll get to that in a second. But just stylistically, she wasn't as pugilistic as her father. And, of course, the Attorney General after court said she may have been very polite, but the facts don't lie. And when it comes to I don't recall, these were communications that she had with Deutsche Bank, the Trump organization's largest lender. She spearheaded some of the projects like the old post office in Washington, D.C. The Attorney General's office says she profited off of that deal that was based on fraudulent statements. They say she made about $4 million from the sale, and she testified to that. But she tried to distance herself from the organization, saying she stepped down from her role as executive vice president in 2017, became a senior advisor to her father in the White House when she was done. She raised her arms and she smiled. We don't expect to hear from her again because, again, they're trying to prevent her from having to travel away from her family.
You've been at the courthouse since the beginning, so you can measure the mood better than anyone. You say the atmosphere different with Ivanka's testimony compared with her father's. How is Team Trump reacting to her testimony?
Well, he was very protective ahead of his adult children's testimony, saying, leave my children alone. Last night in Florida, he had said, even that stupid trial going on in New York, which has been totally discredited, everybody's been discredited. This all comes out of the White House. So he's been decrying election interference. He has slammed Attorney General Letitia James, saying that she is just doing this for political gain. She's using this to fundraise, that she ran on this and ran for governor on this. Also attacking the judge. He's not allowed anymore to attack the principal law clerk because of that partial gag order. The judge, very protective of his staff, saying you can't mention her, you can't post anything about her. But that doesn't refer to the judge himself. So Trump has been attacking the judge as well.
So Ivanka was the prosecution's last witness. Now we're going to start hearing from the defense. Tell us what we're looking for.
So today we're going to hear some housekeeping items on some motions. We're not expected to hear from any witnesses today. The Attorney General's office filed a motion to get 4 defense witnesses dismissed from the case, from their part of the case, essentially saying that they're either rebuttal witnesses to witnesses they didn't call, or it would be irrelevant at this point or redundant. We're also going to likely hear from the defense a directed verdict motion, basically to throw the case out because of a lack of evidence. And then the defense expects that they will begin their case in chief on Monday. They expect to go until December 15th. The judge wants all this wrapped up by December 22nd. We will likely hear from Eric, Don Jr., and the former president again as direct witnesses. With cross, they can really only talk about things that were presented by the AG's case. And remember, this is the AG's case they're bringing, so they were technically hostile witnesses. And we can likely hear some of the same defenses that we have already heard. For example, these statements of financial condition are meaningless to the banks. The banks wanted to work with us. They were making money. Nobody missed out on their money. We were relying on accountants for this information. And also, they didn't include the most valuable part of the asset, and that is the brand. And so we can certainly hear from some fact witnesses, expert witnesses on that as well.
All right. Lindsay Reiser, thank you so much. Good to have you here.
On Capitol Hill, the House Oversight Committee has issued subpoenas for Hunter Biden and the president's brother, James. It is the latest move by Republicans in their impeachment inquiry against the president. Oversight Committee Chair James Comer has accused the Biden family of engaging in, quote, shady business practices.
The White House quickly fired back, calling the investigation a, quote, wild goose chase, and that Republicans are abusing their power to conduct a smear campaign against the president in the run up to next year's election.
For more, we're joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. So Committee Chair Comer also issued a subpoena for Hunter Biden's former business partner, Rob Walker. These are subpoenas for depositions. So will these depositions be made public? And what is the Republican-led committee looking to find out here?
Yeah, that's exactly the goal. And look, this is a pretty dramatic escalation of the Republican impeachment inquiry. They've been investigating certainly Hunter Biden, his business dealings, now whether any of those business dealings connect back to his father, whether President Biden benefited from his son's foreign business dealings, in specific with other countries. And this is a step the committee was foreshadowing for quite some time now. Even Speaker Mike Johnson a couple of days ago saying that perhaps these depositions were long overdue. Now, on the docket in the next couple of weeks, we're set to hear potentially, if he complies, with Rob Walker at the end of November. Then we will potentially hear, if they comply with these subpoenas, from Hunter Biden and President Biden's brother sometime in December. Those dates have been made firm by the panel. For Hunter Biden's part, though, his lawyer suggesting that he's open potentially to appearing before the committee in public at some point, saying, quote, he's eager to have the opportunity in a public forum and at the right time to discuss these matters with the committee.
Julie, House Republicans still have yet to show, concrete evidence of this. We've been looking for that, or influenced by President Biden himself. What was the response of Hunter Biden's legal team to these subpoenas?
Well, that's exactly right. And look, the committee really is trying to connect the dots here when it comes to these subpoenas and this investigation of the president. This is actually the second step that they have taken. The first foundation they have laid out was those bank records that they subpoenaed last month and they received. The committee says, led by Chairman James Comer, of course, Republicans leading this, Democrats having a different view, that those bank records have led them to escalate their inquiry and now subpoena those individuals, including requiring written testimony from a whole slew of other family members. And this is the first time that family members have really been directly subpoenaed by the committee. They say these bank records potentially showed 20 shell companies with all different kinds of cash disbursements that could potentially tie back to the president. Again, though, you're right. There's been no evidence showing that. And this president's son's attorney's team says as much. Even before the subpoenas were sent, they warned the speaker, for example, against proceeding to this step, saying that there has been no evidence, calling this a political stunt, too.
As you just said, Democrats have a different view. How are Democrats on Capitol Hill reacting to this?
Well, I talked to the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee, Jamie Raskin. He's reacting as you would expect him to. I mean, this is somebody who led impeachment proceedings against the former President Trump. So he certainly knows a thing or two. He told me that Republicans are depraving the word impeachment. They are taking away the gravity that this step requires and deserves, calling this all but a political sham. Here's what he told me.
I don't think they've added anything to the credibility of their investigation. It has been an epic flop from the beginning. And the most humiliating moment, of course, was their big hearing where their own witnesses turned against them and said, no, they couldn't see any evidence of a crime and they didn't see any evidence of an impeachable offense. So instead of listening to their own witnesses, they decide to drop hearings, but now they're just going to do depositions of members of the Biden family.
Raskin was sort of laughing there in the beginning because he kept saying that this is just an unserious moment for the panel. And remember, Raskin has been a part of these hearings, including that impeachment inquiry hearing at the end of September, in which the Republicans' own witnesses said it's not enough evidence to move to that step yet of linking anything to the current president, Joe Biden. But of course, this is not happening in a vacuum. The committee's work will continue while David Weiss, the special counsel in Hunter Biden's case, will push on with potential tax charges in the next few months.
All right. Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian aid organization, says at least 5 days of ceasefire is the absolute minimum amount of time agencies in Gaza need to effectively deliver aid and supplies to the region. It comes as calls for a temporary pause grow more intense as the bombing of northern Gaza continues.
Thousands of people are now headed south as water, food, and health supplies run out. Israeli troops continue to close in on Gaza City, where they believe Hamas leaders have set up headquarters. The fighting has been relentless, and this morning the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is condemning both Israel and Hamas.
The atrocities perpetrated by Palestinian armed groups on the 7th of October were heinous. They were war crimes, as is the continued holding of hostages. The collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians is also a war crime, as is unlawful, forcible evacuation of civilians.
NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us from Tel Aviv with the details here. Hey, Jay, good morning. So the United Nations says an estimated 50,000 people fled northern Gaza yesterday. They're now making their way south, but bombings have not stopped there either, as we've seen. Walk us through what this journey is like for those fleeing. How you even get down there, especially knowing that fuel, things like that are limited now. What are conditions like also where they're headed to the south? Are they any safer there?
Yeah, and Savannah, walking it is exactly what tens of thousands are doing right now, many with makeshift white flags or with their hands held up to show that they are not armed and to let Israeli soldiers know they are trying to get to an area where they feel like they will be safer. They've been going through some humanitarian corridors set up by the IDF. And you're right, when they get there, they have no idea where they are going to stay. They have no indication of how they are going to get any food, water, though they will be closer to aid that does at times make it through the Rafah border crossing. But understand this, they are leaving, most of them, with only the things they can carry, leaving their life's possessions and work behind with no clear indication of when or if they may be allowed to go back home.
Jay, we also know that the Rafah border crossing was closed yesterday due to security concerns. So this is that border where aid is able to enter the Gaza Strip. It's also where certain people with approval or specific injured people are able to cross to get help. Are there any updates there about that border crossing?
Yeah, and thankfully some movement along the Rafah border crossing. 106 trucks have been through today with food, water, medicine, medical supplies. So that's good news. 7 ambulances as well moving in today to transport some of the most severely injured to a field hospital just across the border with Egypt, where they can get the surgery that they desperately need. To this point today, there's been no indication that any of the foreign nationals or dual citizenship families that have gathered there, thousands, will be allowed to cross today. So no movement with people leaving Gaza.
Jay, officials say a proposal's on the table for a 3-day pause in fighting. That would be in exchange for the release of about a dozen hostages. So what more do we know about those negotiations? And has Israel indicated it would be willing to temporarily stop their attacks on Gaza for some, but not all hostages?
Yeah, it's interesting. We get the same line that we've really had throughout this entire process, is that negotiations are ongoing with Qatari serving as intermediaries in these talks. But Israel has made it very clear that they are not going to have any pause, any ceasefire of substance until all of the hostages are released. Now, what we have seen is some of those humanitarian corridors open up for a few hours, which is allowing people to move to the south, move to areas that are deemed safer. But as we talked about earlier, there are still airstrikes going on in the south as well. And so getting around in Gaza right now is a very tenuous, very difficult and dangerous process.
Finally, Jay, I do want to ask you one thing that we also saw. The Pentagon says that it launched an airstrike on a weapons facility in Syria. Well, the Defense Department says that the facility was being used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard and affiliated groups. Earlier this week, U.S. officials had started to make these efforts to have direct talks with Iran, saying the U.S. is not looking to spread the conflict in the Middle East. But is there any hope of de-escalation or progress with Iran at all?
Boy, it doesn't seem that way at this point, especially with those strikes yesterday, 2 U.S. F-15 striking what was a weapons facility in eastern Syria and taking that facility out. They say that it was, and I'm quoting here, a self-defense strike responding to a series of strikes against U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria. So, no, it looks like at this point there is still a lot of tension and a lot of movement there as well.
All right, Jay Gray, thank you very much.
Big news this morning. Actors expected to get back to work soon after SAG-AFTRA and the Hollywood studios reached a tentative agreement last night.
That's right. The deal would end a near 4-month strike. Comes after weeks of negotiations that at some points included some of the top executives in Hollywood. SAG-AFTRA says the deal is now set to go to the union's national board tomorrow for review and consideration.
Entertainment journalist, pop culture expert Brian Balthazar joins us now with more on this. Let's talk about this tentative deal with studios, which we should say includes our parent company, That's NBC right. Universal. Right. We know actors wanted better pay, they wanted better protections and safeguards when it comes to AI. What are they getting?
Okay, so we'll know the full details tomorrow. What we do know is they got about a 7% increase in base wage increases, and that's actually 2% more than the directors and the writers got. The AI thing, we're waiting to find out a little bit more about that, but this was a sticking point. What's so interesting about this, we think about background actors and that's how they're going to use it. It's so much more than that. It's involving actually the higher paid actors they were sticking on, is using some, like imagine Matt Damon can't come for a reshoot, so they use his voice via AI or his face via AI to do a scene where they could have had him do another shoot day or something like that. So that's one of them. And also an issue was the use of deceased actors. If they already have a scan, can they then use a deceased actor's likeness or voice in a subsequent film without the permission of their estate? So this is really what AI is eventually and probably already is capable of, and those were some of the sticking points. Obviously, we had they had a great increase in pension and retirement benefits. They're valuing it at about $1 billion overall, the increases.
I can't wait to see these details, especially since it got to the point of the big companies saying this is last, best, final, and then there were still more conversations. So what went down here? So, Brian, what does this mean for somebody at home? I mean, now that there's a possible agreement, is it going to change what we start to see on TV? What goes right back into production? What's this timeline?
Well, you know, the New York Marathon, imagine that without a staggered start, right? Okay, the thing is now all of these people are calling their production houses, all their makeup talent, because they all want to get started now. In fact, I guarantee you at 12:01 this morning, when the strike was lifted, people were already calling the studio saying, when can we get in? Because now it's a race to get your project that was already in progress going. We'll see that films like Dune that's already done and in the can, we're going to see them start promoting it and releasing it right away because we had a dismal weekend last weekend without it. We'll see the awards circuit going. We're going to see actors promoting their films that did run this year for awards. They're really trying to salvage the summer movie season, though, because those are the ones that they have just enough time, but not a lot of time to get some of those movies in and done. But everything's just going to gear up. We're going to really see for ourselves how crazy this gets and how fast they can get things on.
We should tell you, we're scanning you right now, by the way.
Right, exactly. I look like a Christmas gift, but I am actually a person.
You look great.
Doing, I love it.
Thank you.
This has taken a huge financial toll on actors and writers and so many other people. This is a domino effect.
Right.
Is there anything being done to help with financial recovery for those folks?
Well, as you remember, the late night hosts had a fund that they were doing by having a podcast that raised money for those. The SAG-AFTRA had a fund that was helping some of these actors. So some of the biggest performing actors like George Clooney, Julia Roberts, I believe Meryl Streep, all donated money to this same fund. But really, these were people that were really tapping out. You know, it was getting really rough, but also the studios were getting really scared too. Now it's a time of recovery and really a flood of work coming their way.
It literally will be a flood.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Brian Balthazar, thank you so much. Appreciate
Our little
it.
Christmas gift. Good to have you here. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, you could say, this is why we can't have nice things. A journalist just hired as USA Today's first Taylor Swift reporter, already facing criticism from Swifties. We'll tell you why.
Up first after the break, thousands of migrants on the way to the U.S. blocking traffic on one of Mexico's busiest highways. The latest on that crisis after the break.
And a storm system is working east and bringing heavy rain with it. Coming up, we'll tell you who should keep the umbrellas handy today and who will need them this weekend. That's after the break.
Back now with headlines from around the world, starting with a major traffic jam in Mexico caused by migrants on their way to the U.S.
NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now with more. Hey, Molly, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning to both of you. You can see in those pictures lots of families, lots of mothers and children. But as Joe said, 3,000 migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, and Haiti started blocking traffic yesterday on one of Mexico's main southern highways to demand transit or exit visas to reach the U.S. This particular group started walking on October 30th. Activists said the blockade would continue. Moving to South Korea, have the French bed bugs, gone east. South Korea has become the latest to be fending off a bed bug invasion. The government has announced a month-long campaign after reports of outbreaks at bathhouses, university dorms, and train stations, now all on high alert. 30 suspected or confirmed infestations have been reported since the end of October. And finally, to a Picasso masterpiece selling at auction for a whopping $139 million, the second highest price ever achieved by Picasso. The piece is called Femme à la Montre, Woman with a Watch. It also becomes the most valuable work sold at auction this year. And Picasso's muse in the painting, Marie-Therese Walter. She is a French model who was also a lover of Picasso. She is in many of his paintings. Fun fact for you.
Very cool. All right, Molly, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you. Jack Frost could be making a visit, bringing a chance of light snow to the northern New England area. Angie, you like that one?
This is the good Jack Frost, not like the one in the horror movies. Angie, last minute is here for you. Isn't there like a horror movie? Yeah.
I was terrified of that movie.
Exactly,
I saw it. I accidentally saw it as a kid, and I was never the same after that, guys. Because I thought it was the friendly Jack Frost. Yes, but you're right. The friendly Jack Frost for our friends in northern New England. We've got some of these winter advisories up. You can see they include parts of New York stretching all the way up into Maine. So yes, the slippery roads are out there with a little rain and a little snow working through that kind of icy mix for folks in this region through the morning hours and even into the afternoon hours. The farther north you go, those will still be around. We also have a couple showers that we're going to see for the southern portions of the Northeast. So umbrellas needed throughout that area for at least the early part of our day today. Now we move to the south where we're expecting a pretty good amount of rain here over the next couple of days. This is through Saturday. Anywhere from 1 inch to 2 inches are going to be the higher amounts, maybe isolated spots up to 3 inches. They sure do need it in that area, but here's that plume of moisture that we're going to track over the next couple of days. The system is going to continue to move to the north and east. It's going to bring some rainfall to places like Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma through the day today. But as it moves east, we'll see the southeast and parts of the mid-Atlantic pick up on some of that rain as well. And I say beneficial because look at this drought monitor. We've got the really dark red. That's exceptional drought. And when you look at the big picture, 99% of the state of Louisiana is in a drought. We've got some really dry areas out there. If we take this out a little farther and look at 2023 as a whole, we've got some worsening drought conditions in a lot of spots. We've only seen about 77% of The average rainfall in the Omaha area, about 50% for Phoenix, 60% for San Antonio. So we're well below average in a lot of those spots. Not the case, though, in California and out west, really. We've went way past where we normally are on average. 236% of the average rainfall in a year so far for Los Angeles. So you know what that did, guys? It helped us out with our drought. Here's where we were last year at this time. Just 1 year ago, you can see exceptional, extreme, severe drought, and moderate, all covering the entire state. As we look to where we are now, no drought. We're drought-free in California. So, of course, we had, a tropical storm, and we had a really wet winter there, so that helped. But good news when it comes to the drought conditions there. But some much-needed rainfall for the south and parts of the Tennessee Valley over the next couple of days.
California, just a quieter wildfire season, which is a blessing for that area.
Yeah, and they're actually dealing with some fire conditions today, so it's a good thing that they're dealing with not all that drought that they were seeing last year.
Some of those maps really stressed me out, but this made me feel a little bit better.
I ended on a good note for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Angie.
Unlike Jack Frost, who
scared me.
Oofda. All right, coming up, it's being called a weight loss breakthrough.
Up next, we'll tell you about the diabetes drug just approved for expanded use. Stay with us. We have talked a lot about weight loss drugs and how hugely popular they've become over the last year or so. Well, now there is yet another drug out there. The FDA just approved what's called Zepbound. It's a new medication from Eli Lilly.
The active ingredient in the drug has already been approved for the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Now Eli Lilly has the green light to expand the use of its blockbuster drug. Clinical trials showed it helped people lose up to 52 pounds in 16 months.
Wow. All right. NBC News medical fellow Dr. Akshay Syal joins us now. Dr. Syal, good morning. So what do we need to know about this drug in particular? But then also we're starting to hear about some of these side effects. Any side effects here people should keep in mind?
Good morning. Yeah, so very exciting news. I mean, this drug works and it works really well. And so for those who don't know, it's similar to the medication Ozempic or Wegovy. It's an injectable drug. You take it about once a week. And guys, what they found is they studied people for about a year, about 72 weeks. And people lost about 22% of their body weight.
My goodness.
That's almost a fourth of your body weight that disappeared after a year of taking this. But guys, some people are going to ask us, does it work better than Ozempic? Which one should I choose? These drugs were not studied head to head. However, in their individual trials, this one appeared to work better.
There are some analysts who say this could be the best-selling drug of all time. That says something right there. You mentioned it's hard to compare with others, but what does set it apart from some of these other weight loss drugs we've been using?
Yeah, it's a great question, Joe. Actually, so when you look at Ozempic and you look at this, this one has the same mechanism as Ozempic with a little bit more. Ozempic targets one little receptor in the body. This one targets two. And so that additional sort of mechanism of action here kind of, we think, helps it work better and help people lose better, 7% more of their body weight, at least in their individual trials.
And what about side effects? What's the downside here?
So, side effects with these drugs in these trials include problems with your stomach. You could have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. But guys, a lot of attention really has been paid to the long-term effects. These are relatively new drugs. And what we know is you have to be on them for life. Same way you would, a cholesterol medication. If you stop taking that, your cholesterol goes up. But what we don't know is, especially with kids, if we're starting people as young as 12 on these, what's going to happen after years and years of taking this? We just don't know.
Do we know moving forward when we'll see it on store shelves, how it is you would get it, and potentially how much it's going to cost?
$1 million question, right? So
hopefully not $1 million, so.
I can tell you guys, getting patients to get these covered, particularly those who don't have diabetes, is a battle. It is tough to get these covered, particularly if you don't have one of the commercial insurance plans. But a month's supply of this without insurance is estimated to cost about $1,000, projected, as you can see here, $25 to $48 billion of sales. But, in order to get this covered, you have to have a BMI over 30, which is the definition of obese. And if you don't have a BMI of 30, you can have one of 27 and have things like sleep apnea, sort of conditions associated with a lot of weight. And hopefully from there, try to get it covered.
You mentioned that these are new. Do we know yet, or as a doctor, how would you recommend it to somebody? Are these medications meant to be something that gets you to a place that you are happy with and then you go off? Or are these something that you're on long term like you would be if you were using this for diabetes?
It's a great question, Savannah. We actually did a story on this for NBCnews.com, sort of looking at long term, particularly among the, when we're starting kids as young as 12 on these.
Right.
Are they supposed to wean off of these? Is that sort of the goal? And, in talking to obesity centers around the country, that is the goal, is to not, it's not this or diet. You have to do both. And what the goal is, hopefully one day, once the weight comes off, you can start to decrease the dose of this, maintain a healthy diet, and hopefully not add on too much of that weight back.
All right, Dr. Akshay, a talker for sure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Anytime.
Coming up, he gave up life in the U.S. for stardom overseas.
A lot of people love to ask, why did you move to Korea to pursue a music career? It's like, who do you see that looks like me?
Now, K-pop sensation Eric Nam is moving on again to focus on his mental health and career as an independent artist. I'll share our conversation up next on Morning News Now.
We're back with what's making financial headlines, starting off with some good news for Disney.
CNBC's Silvana Hanau is with us, as you can see. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Savannah. Hey, Joe. Good morning to you. Yes, so Disney reporting better than expected earnings as higher attendance at its theme parks helped to offset a drop in ad revenue at ABC. The media giant adding nearly 7 million Disney Plus subscribers. That's well ahead of the estimates, and that's thanks in part to new content during the quarter, including the Star Wars series Ahsoka and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The streaming service now has more than 150 million subscribers worldwide. Disney says it's on track to reach its goal of saving more than $7 billion as it aggressively cuts costs. Microsoft is reportedly planning to bring its AI Copilot assistant to Windows 10. Now, this could put Copilot in front of a lot more people, as Windows 10 currently has about 1 billion monthly active subscribers worldwide. Now, that's versus the 400 million for Windows 11. That would also make it easier for Microsoft to sell developers on the idea they should build plugins for Copilot. And Airbnb has launched a new feature that could help people avoid searching frantically for keys. Starting later this year, hosts who are in the invite-only early access program will be able to link smart locks to their Airbnb account and automatically generate a code for each reservation. The code will be activated at a guest check-in time and deactivated at checkout. Guests will be able to see the smart lock code in the Airbnb app, guys. That makes it a lot easier.
No kidding. Good idea. All right. Thanks, Savannah. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, now for a conversation I was lucky enough to have with K-pop superstar Eric Nam. He was named one of GQ Korea's Men of the Year, featured on Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia, and he became one of YouTube Music's global trending artists on the rise. But his journey has been unique and at times difficult. Eric is choosing to open up about it so others feel less alone.
Eric Nam has been called an accidental K-pop star.
I was supposed to start working as a business analyst at Deloitte Consulting, actually, in New York. And I kind of stumbled into music through a music competition show.
The show was in Korea, where he ultimately spent a decade as one of entertainment's most recognizable stars. But moving so far from his hometown of Atlanta made for a difficult transition at times.
I would try my best to understand these really emotional lyrics that are beautifully written, but at that time, my Korean language just skills weren't there.
How was your mental health when you were in the K-pop world?
In a 10-year span, there's a clear roller coaster of emotions. When I had the courage to say, hey, I think I really need help, I really want to talk to a therapist or someone, the first response was like, oh, you shouldn't, because if somebody gets wind, that's going to really hurt your career.
The grueling nature of his schedule ultimately took a toll on Eric's health.
And so I had this bad cycle of everything breaking down. I'm anxious, I'm overworked, I'm burnt out, not sleeping, and then I had like panic attacks. And so it was this period where it got really, really bad for me personally.
Day 5063, album.
Eric decided to make a big change and take a big risk, becoming an independent artist.
What was the decision like to leave a record label?
It is daunting, but also very gratifying.
What pushed you to go independent?
To be completely honest, if there was an opportunity for me to sign with like a major US label at the time, I think I would have taken it. I feel like there still aren't that many Asian American singer-songwriters that are very active in the States. We just haven't traditionally been given that opportunity.
When you made that decision,
Who'd you have with you?
I have a few really good friends and confidants. The biggest would be my brothers.
And they've made it a family business. Eddie is Eric's manager, and Brian is the CEO of their startup, Dive Studios, that produces content with a myriad of K-pop stars. The brothers also have a new self-care platform called Mindset, where mega artists share their personal mental health journeys.
And we found that fans really found a lot of healing and value, and they felt heard and seen through these stories.
Now Eric has a new album out, and he's on a world tour. We got to tag along for a behind-the-scenes look at his stop in New York City.
This is absolutely one of the coolest venues I think I've ever done.
One of the ways that I've heard you describe it is an existential crisis album.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What if we don't know how grateful we should be? And that's kind of what made, I guess, the fabric of the album.
Maybe you can complete it for me. I know the grass is green,
but I wish it was greener.
Yeah, the sky is blue, but I
wish it was a little bluer today. The first line is get a house on a hill, make a whole lot of money, that's when I'll be okay. Get a hit, make it big, maybe that's when I'll love me and all my problems will go away.
It's a particularly special song for Eric to share with his fans.
It's like, okay, we're all on this earth together going through the same thing, and there's like a really special connection.
And Eric himself is recognizing that maybe the grass is green enough.
The focus should be on enjoying the process or enjoying the people that we have around us instead of looking for all these other external validations that perhaps we don't necessarily need.
What a good way to wrap it up, right? And look at that. So first of all, I'll just say I'm now part of Nom Nation, as his fans are called. I loved him. He was fantastic. But the thing also I really took away from this was the family aspect of it. He has these two brothers, as you heard about in there, Eddie and Brian. Eddie, his manager, Brian, his CEO. They have truly made it a family business the way that they support each other. Even Eddie, when Eric was still in Korea, was constantly going there to try to like make sure that things were working out, especially because there was that language barrier. Eric says a lot of people don't realize I'm just from Atlanta. You know, I'm from here. And then I went there and became this K-pop sensation. And one of the things that he said to me is when people ask, you know, why did you do that? Why did you have to go to Korea? He said, who do you see that looks like me that's making pop music here that's not in that K-pop world? And he was also really honest, as you heard in there, about the K-pop world and how grueling it can be. He said they kind of make these 360 stars there where it's almost like, you know, you're doing all these advertisements and you're in TV shows and you're making music. It's not just kind of your one area. So it was really cool to hear so much from somebody who'd been there, is making a change. Being an independent artist is not easy.
Yeah, and I love that he's incorporating the mental health component. What is that, like the mental health thing? Like, what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's this platform called Mindset. It's very cool. It has a bunch of different tools like journaling, meditation, that type of thing. But then the real draw of it for a lot of people, which is then getting them to those tools, is that really famous other K-pop stars, as well as country music stars like Tori Kelly's on there, sharing their own mental health journey, explaining, you know, what it is that they've gone through. And then fans, as Eric said, they're just hearing that they feel very seen and heard in that way.
Very
and
cool.
Like they're not alone.
Love that conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, coming up, a coveted job opening. It's been filled.
That's right. USA Today has hired its first ever Taylor Swift reporter, but not all Swifties are on board. So what's behind the bad blood? We'll explain next on Morning News Now.
Get in, losers. Yeah, the trailer for the new Mean Girls movie is out. Now, if you're wondering, hey, don't we already have a Mean Girls movie? Well, this film is actually based on the 2018 musical, which was based on the original 2004 film starring Lindsay Lohan and Rachel McAdams. It looks like well-known moments from the original are sticking around, including the Pink Burn Book and the Jingle Bell Rock Dance. The cast includes Ann Gary Rice as Katie Heron and Renee Rapp. Great choice as Regina George. The movie's writer Tina Fey returns as Miss Norbury, and John Hamm joins as Coach Carr. The movie arrives in theaters on January 12th.
It's being called a musical, though, and there was not really music in the trailer. So people are like, what?
I guess. I mean, it was a musical on Broadway, so I know there is music.
Yes, I know. I just wanted to get a
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
They're keeping it for the movie.
Yeah. Also, it's kind of wild that that movie is already being remade.
I know.
What?
Exactly.
Okay. The search is over for that Taylor Swift reporter that you probably heard about. There's a frenzy over this viral job post, and USA Today now says it has found the candidate to fill the position.
The newspaper chain tapped 35-year-old Brian West, a journalist from Arizona, a self-proclaimed Swiftie for the role he started this week. His hiring is being met with some criticism. Some journalists and Swifties are questioning whether he's the right person for the job.
NBC News youth and internet culture reporter Callan Rosenblatt joins us now. Callan, good to see you. All right, so maybe that was expected because there's a lot of big feelings about Taylor Swift either way. But what do we know about this man, Brian West, USA Today's inaugural Taylor Swift reporter?
Yes, Joe, Savannah, Brian West is the lucky reporter to land the most coveted job in media and possibly in stan culture. We got our introduction to Brian West when he posted a video with 13 reasons, lucky 13 for Taylor Swift, why he should be the Taylor Swift reporter for Gannett, USA Today, and the Tennessean. In that clip, we saw, him talk about how he's a devoted Swiftie. He's met Taylor Swift. He said that their ears touched. That was a very special moment for him. He said that, he's a long-running reporter. He has a lot of experience in the field. And he also has been good at, sussing out things like Easter eggs in her music and in her social media, which has been a big part of Swiftie culture. So he has called himself, sort of the ultimate Swiftie, and that he is ready to take on this role.
So I think it's kind of like being elected president. You're not going to please everyone. So some folks are skeptical about his hiring. What are they saying?
I'm sorry, Joe. I think I lost you for a moment.
Yeah, no worries. Just what are the skeptics saying?
Yeah, the skeptics are saying effectively that, the Swifties are disappointed that a man was hired for this role when they say that Taylor Swift is someone who really embodies femininity and female culture. The reporters are worried that, a Swiftie is going to be the person who's covering Taylor Swift, and can he hold her accountable? She's the most powerful woman in music. Can he be objective while he's covering her? Now, he said that this is sort of like covering a sports team in your hometown. You may root for the home team, but you're still going to be objective when covering them. So the Swifties are a little bit upset because, they kind of wanted a female reporter in this role. And the reporters just want to see that this guy can be objective. So there's a few dissenting voices, but USA Today told me in a statement, haters gonna hate, we know the rest.
Yeah. Also, there was a tweet for people who didn't know what that meant. It said false god. That's because that's one of the songs he said that he didn't like, and people have a lot of feelings about that song. Callan, do we know what West's job is actually going to look like? Obviously it's covering Taylor Swift, but what does that mean? What are some of the assignments that we think we might see him having soon?
Yeah, well, Taylor Swift kind of affects, the gamut of economic impact. She affects pop culture. So, we'll probably see a few assignments that have to do with her relationship with Travis Kelce, and her attending football games, how that affects ticket sales of football games or attendance. We'll probably see things like, she has 2 more albums to re-record. And what does that mean, for those re-recordings? And also, as I mentioned, Brian said he's really good at sussing out Easter eggs. So hopefully we'll see him try to find those Easter eggs before we figure out which next recording is coming. As I said, there's 2 more albums for her to re-record. So it'll probably be things that run the gamut like that.
I mean, we're all ready for her to announce Reputation. I think that will be it. But Callan, also, I think some of the other stuff that's been funny is just hearing about all the different types of people that applied, how many people applied. Tell us about that, about what we now know about this process.
A bunch of reporters have applied to this. We know that it ran from everything just from, general assignment reporters to very storied White House reporters. There was no one who didn't want this job. As I said, it's the most coveted job probably in journalism and in pop culture. And there is also a Beyonce reporter to be announced at Gannett and USA Today. So we will have to have this conversation all over again once the Beyonce reporter is announced and see how the public reacts to that also highly coveted role.
There you go. Callan, thank you so much.
The music beat is getting much more concentrated these days. So that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this Thursday, this post-debate morning. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, it was fireworks in Florida. The 5 candidates hoping to knock off former President Trump as the Republican Party's presidential pick, locking horns in last night's debate. The group clashing over a range of topics, including foreign policy and abortion, with the discussion getting personal at times.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice. You're just
the easy answer.
We've got the biggest moments from that debate, plus what Trump was up to at a nearby rival event. Also overnight, Israeli forces continue to bomb Gaza as IDF troops engage in fierce ground battles with Hamas militants in the northern part of the Strip. The UN's human rights chief accusing both sides of committing war crimes, while the UN Secretary General is questioning Israel's military tactics.
We have, in a few days in Gaza, thousands and thousands of children killed, which means there is also something clearly wrong in the way the military operations are being done.
The latest on ceasefire efforts amid fears of a broader escalation as the Pentagon announces more strikes on Iran-backed groups in Syria. Back to work, the Hollywood actors strike perhaps coming to an end after studio bosses and union leaders reach a tentative deal. Details of that agreement and how soon before productions could resume. Plus, a new opera is shining a light on the life of Malcolm X. We're going to speak with both the composer and star of the production in our latest edition of Flipping the Script. It's happening at the Met Opera. I had a chance to see it the other night. 3.5 hours. Incredible production. Very innovative. Looking forward to having that conversation.
I can't wait to see that. And I am endlessly impressed by your ability to consume entertainment.
And then wake up in the morning and be here. Right. We begin this hour with the race for the White House. 5 Republican candidates vying for the party nomination, taking part in their third primary debate.
GOP frontrunner Donald Trump opted again to not participate. The leading contenders who did went head-to-head last night in Miami in a debate you saw right here on NBC News Now. The 2 hours were heavy on both policy and personal attacks. NBC News senior national correspondent and News Now anchor Tom Yamas kicks off our coverage from Miami this morning.
We saw a side to former Ambassador Nikki Haley that many voters likely have never seen. What happens when someone crosses the line, both her wardrobe and even her daughter dragged into the debate, and she had enough, as you're about to see. And though last night was mostly policy driven, with the candidates given ample time to talk about the issues, it didn't take very long for the debate to get heated, even nasty. Overnight in Miami, 5 Republican presidential candidates facing off in a contentious and sometimes personal political debate.
She doesn't answer so this is what I will tell you.
Battling for attention in the Republican Party with former President Donald Trump, the clear frontrunner who was holding a rally in the same county.
He owes it to you to be on this stage.
The candidates were pressed on foreign policy and how they would address the Israel-Hamas war with Israel's prime minister.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas.
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them.
But personal clashes took center stage, particularly between Vivek Ramaswamy and Nikki Haley, including a debate over TikTok.
In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Your adult daughter. You have her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy answer.
Ramaswamy also accusing Haley of profiting off her old job as UN ambassador.
Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
They're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them. I wear heels. They're not for a fashion statement. They're for ammunition.
He called you Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels. Do you think that was sexist?
I don't even give him the time of day. He has proven that he is just not worthy of being president of the United States.
Haley has been rising in the polls, but former Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is also hoping for a boost, though he trails the former president significantly. DeSantis blaming Trump for the GOP's poor performance in state elections on Tuesday.
He said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
The candidates also sparring over a coherent message on the abortion issue that helped power Democrats to victories in the midterms and this week.
I would certainly, as President of the United States, have a 15-week national limit.
No Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So let's find consensus.
This is an issue that should be decided in each state.
And in one of the more stunning moments of the debate, candidate Vivek Ramaswamy called the Ukrainian president a Nazi, even though Vladimir Zelensky is both Jewish and had relatives that died in the Holocaust. Now, the Ramaswamy campaign tells NBC News this morning that's not what he said, that he was misunderstood on stage. We also do want to mention that former President Trump had a very big rally, an energetic rally, 12 miles from here in the city of Hialeah, which is still in Miami-Dade County. The mayor there saying they're going to name a street after him in a city that is almost entirely Hispanic. Reporting from Miami. Now back to you guys.
All right, Tom Yamas, thank you so much.
For more on the debate, let's bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, good to have you with us. So we know the former president, Donald Trump, has maintained a rather large lead in the polls for months now. Really, right now, the rest of the field fighting for second place. Who needed to stand out last night? Just what are your key takeaways?
Yeah, I still thought that the two people who are really vying to be Donald Trump's the number two in the race right now were Nikki Haley, as the piece that Tom Yamas just ended up having, as well as Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor. And, you know, what was interesting is that they also ended up clashing on issues like China. And it will be interesting to see on which one, if there is going to be a one anti-Trump alternative, who that person ends up being. And I do think that last night was a little bit of a test case on who that one Trump alternative might be.
Mark, let's talk about abortion. Of course, it's a big issue ever since Roe v. Wade was overturned, and it's also one we just saw Democrats score a win on this week. Ohio voters approving enshrining abortion rights into their state's constitution during Tuesday's election. How was this handled last night by the Republican field, of course, as it's an issue that Democrats are likely to highlight in 2024?
Yeah, Savannah, this might have been actually, to me, the most interesting clash and disagreement that we ended up seeing. And it was actually saved for the final question of the debate. And we ended up seeing the Republican candidates take different positions. You ended up having Nikki Haley talk about consensus, kind of trying to take, at least for a Republican, the most moderate position when it comes to abortion. On the other hand, you ended up having South Carolina Senator Tim Scott call for a federal 15-week ban. Ron DeSantis ended up saying Republicans just need to do better in races like we saw on Tuesday in Ohio. And Chris Christie said that it should be decided state by state.
So looking ahead, Mark, we've got another GOP debate set for next month in Alabama. Anything else we should know about that debate? Does anyone need to change their approach, their strategy heading into it? What do you expect to see as we go to that one?
Yeah, Joe, there are going to be, I think, two things to know about that fourth next debate. Number one, Donald Trump has said he will not attend that as well. That will be the fourth straight debate that the former president has not attended. And the Republican National Committee, which sets the qualification criteria, is going to actually raise that. So you're going to actually have to raise more money, have higher poll numbers to be able to make that fourth debate. We saw last night's debate stage at 5 with higher criteria. It might actually go down to 3 or 4 candidates.
All right, Mark Murray, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, turning now to the growing calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas.
This morning, tens of thousands of people are fleeing northern Gaza as Israeli defense forces ramp up bombings in the region. Senior UN officials are now accusing both sides of committing serious war crimes. It comes as pressure increases on Israel to allow humanitarian aid inside Gaza.
NBC News chief international correspondent Keir Simmons joins us now from Tel Aviv with the latest here. Hey, Keir, good morning. So we did hear from the head of the UN Commission on Human Rights actually accusing both sides of war crimes. Tell us what exactly he said, and will this have any impact?
Well, first of all, with what he said, he was standing outside the Rafah crossing where he has gone to collect evidence, if you like, and he talks about the terror attacks on October 7th carried out by Hamas and the abduction of people, the kidnapping of people, those being a war crime. And then he equally, or in the same breath, if you like, accuses Israel of war crimes over its approach towards the civilian population in Gaza, and particularly the movement of people. We heard just yesterday 50,000 Palestinians fleeing from the north of Gaza to the south. Now, the Israelis, of course, would describe that as them moving in order to be safe, which is, of course, what the Israelis have called for. Others are very suspicious of the population, of large population movements like that. I mean, I think one of the issues is that the United Nations has been discredited in many people's eyes. The Israeli government, incredibly critical of the Secretary General of the United Nations, for example, even some calling for his resignation. So to answer the last part of your question, will it have any impact? Honestly, probably not.
So, Kira, a State Department official says the U.S. believes the Palestinian Authority is, quote, the appropriate place to look for governance eventually. That's still a long ways off in the future. But is this at odds with how Israel might see life beyond the war?
It might be. I'm not sure that necessarily there is a plan in the Israeli government for exactly what happens after this war, and that's understandable, right? The October 7th terror attacks came as a surprise. At risk of sounding kind of pessimistic on all fronts, I think there is a real question about, kind of what a post-Hamas Gaza looks like, if that is where we get to. And folks who know the history of Gaza and of the Palestinian question will know the deep animosity, to say the least, between the PLO, for example, and Hamas. The fact that there were elections that elected Hamas at one point in Gaza, the fact that there's been a civil war at one stage. So the idea that the Palestinian Authority can come to Gaza and have authority there, and also that it would want to, if Israel has, as Prime Minister Netanyahu suggested, is dealing with the security of Gaza, that it would want to run the civilian side of Gaza. I mean, these are all questions. I don't have answers, honestly. Clearly, diplomats will be thinking about what it looks like. But again, I'm not sure any of them really have answers either.
Keir, in Paris, more than 80 countries, aid organizations, they're meeting to discuss relief efforts for Palestinians. What is the goal there?
Yeah. Well, I think it's do something. I mean, just talking about that, all of those difficulties and those challenges politically, I think there are a lot of countries that see those challenges and in some senses don't have an answer or don't want to be kind of pulled into the politics, but do want to be doing something. So you see many of the Gulf states, for example, there in Paris, talking about the aid that they can give to civilians in Gaza, just trying to address that humanitarian question, led by President Macron in France. France also trying to be seen to be doing something. I mean, I suppose you could say, and to state the obvious, at some point there is going to have to be something, some kind of a resolution, some kind of diplomacy at the end of all this. And I think that's what, in Paris, aside from the humanitarian question, they're trying to get their heads around or prepare for.
All right, Kirsten Mintz, thank you so much.
The Pentagon has confirmed that the Defense Department carried out its second airstrike in Syria against Iranian-controlled militia groups. That's escalating concerns the U.S. will be dragged into another war in the Middle East. The strike follows dozens of attacks on U.S. forces in the region in the past few weeks. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now with the latest on this. Gabe, good morning.
Hey there, Joe. Good morning. The defense secretary says President Biden ordered the airstrike in response to a series of attacks against U.S. personnel in Iraq and Syria. Another senior defense official says the strike is intended to send a clear message to Iran that we hold it accountable. This morning, tensions escalating across the Middle East and the United States increasingly involved, responding after U.S. bases have come under attack from Iranian-backed forces. 2 U.S. fighter jets conducted an airstrike on a weapons storage facility in eastern Syria that the Pentagon says was being used by Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It is the U.S.'s second retaliatory strike amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war as concerns mount that Iranian-backed groups could widen the conflict.
We have been very clear to countries in the region that we are incredibly keen on ensuring that this conflict does not spread.
Since October 17th, the Pentagon says there have been about 41 attacks against bases housing American troops in Iraq and Syria, and Iran is continuing to use its influence in other countries to target the U.S. Just yesterday, off the coast of Yemen, a U.S. defense official says an unmanned U.S. Reaper surveillance drone was shot down by Iran-backed Houthi forces while in international airspace. The Houthi forces released this video and claimed the drone was carrying out hostile spying activities. While the war between Israel and Hamas rages, the United States aiming to contain the conflict. As for the latest U.S. airstrike in Syria, a senior military official could not say whether there were any casualties, but says the U.S. was certain no civilians were killed. The official also says there will be increased air patrols around U.S. bases to deter further attacks, Jeff.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much. House Republicans are escalating their impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden.
They're issuing subpoenas to the president's son Hunter and brother James, as well as a family business associate.
For more, we're joined by NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney. And so, Ken, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Comer, has accused the Biden family of engaging in, quote, shady business practices. Critics will say, hey, you got to prove that. So what can you tell us about these subpoenas?
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. That's right. The central premise of this Republican probe is that Hunter Biden was influencing policy, was being paid to influence public policy using his father's influence, and then was somehow kicking back money to Joe Biden, and that the president's brother James was somehow also involved. This was back when Mr. Biden was vice president. As you said, there has been no evidence presented thus far proving these allegations, but James Comer, the chairman of this committee, thinks that by getting Hunter Biden and James Biden and another business associate named Rob Walker under oath to testify, that he can move this thing along. He called what the Bidens are engaging in an influence peddling scheme. So the James Biden has been ordered to appear December 6th for a closed-door deposition. Hunter Biden a week later, and Rob Walker, their business associate, summoned to appear on November 29th. Joe.
Ken, these subpoenas aren't necessarily a surprise, but tell us how the White House and Biden family are responding.
Yeah, Savannah, the White House dismissing this inquiry in general and these subpoenas specifically. They called the Republican probe a wild goose chase. And in the statement, the White House said, instead of using the power of Congress to pursue a partisan political smear campaign against the president and his family, extreme House Republicans should do their job. So that's the rhetoric. But this really does kind of get under the skin of the White House. This has become a recurring problem for them, guys.
Ken, let's switch gears and fully tap your expertise here. Former President Donald Trump's civil fraud trial continuing in New York yesterday. Ivanka Trump became the latest and last member of the Trump family to testify. What were the big takeaways from yesterday's testimony?
Right. So the important thing to remember is that Ivanka Trump was once a defendant in this case, but she was dismissed out of it by an appeals court because she hasn't worked for this organization since 2017. And the judges ruled that her conduct in this case was too old to be at issue. But she was still an important witness. While she was cordial and pleasant, even the attorney general acknowledged that, she was confronted with emails and other correspondence that showed she was involved, for example, in negotiations with Deutsche Bank, which was one of Mr. Trump's biggest banking partners, where they were giving him very favorable loan terms premised on his financial statements, which the judge has already ruled were fraudulent. Now, Ivanka Trump said she didn't know anything about the financial statements. Her memory grew quite hazy whenever there was discussion about the financial statements. But the testimony did make clear, again, that the Trump organization got really great business terms based on what the AG says, and the judge has ruled were inflated representations of his wealth. And so, you know, the judge has already ruled that there was fraud here. So this trial, again, is only about the damages and the penalties. So big, you know, rough times ahead for Donald Trump and his business entities, guys.
All right. Ken Delaney, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, after Hollywood shut down for nearly 4 months and rocked the entertainment industry, the actors' strike seems to be over.
Yeah, SAG-AFTRA has agreed to a tentative deal with studios and streamers. That happened last night. Joining us now, NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas with all the details. I guess we'll learn details maybe as the days go along here, but what can you tell us? Good morning.
It is a good morning indeed for so many in Hollywood who can finally get back to work this morning.
This morning, Hollywood actors can finally get back to work after an unprecedented 118 days on the picket lines. The Actors Union announcing late Wednesday that it approved a tentative agreement with the AMPTP, which represents studios and streamers, including NBC News' parent company, Comcast. Actors at a movie premiere Wednesday night were thrilled.
The strike is over.
That's amazing.
You're joking.
Yeah.
Don't tell me that now. Let's go.
Other actors taking to social media to share their excitement, including Octavia Spencer, who posted, "Who else is dancing right now?" And actor Kate Walsh, who wrote, "I am in teary awe of my fellow actors and sister unions who fought with all they had."
It is a very big deal, and we are very excited about it. The valuation of this deal comes in at a little bit more than $1 billion over the term of the agreement.
The AMPTP says that this deal represents a new paradigm, including the largest increase in minimum wages in 40 years. a new residual compensation structure for streaming programs, and extensive consent and compensation protections in the use of artificial intelligence. This announcement comes after months of meetings between the union and studios. Fran Drescher, the president of SAG-AFTRA, reflecting on the tense negotiations in an interview with NBC News last month.
It's being driven by people, and people that are driven by greed.
The fallout from the longest actors' strike in history has been far-reaching. The work stoppage not only hurting actors, but industries like transportation and craft services. The halt in productions has cost California's economy billions of dollars. After more than 13 weeks, the Hollywood ending so many have been hoping for.
So the big question now is, how quickly could production start up again?
So in theory, actors, 150,000 of them, can go back to work today. But as we all know, sets, film sets, TV sets, these are huge productions that require weeks of planning. So since we've had the writers back to work now for a few weeks, in theory, some of those episodes or shows and scripts have been starting to get revved up again. But it's going to take a little bit of time. But the good news is we could see money getting back into the pockets of these actors and of the other industries like craft services and transportation, like I was talking about. Get back to work, get some money in their pockets before the holidays. But I still think you're going to see some things move around. You might see shorter TV seasons in the spring. And look, they're not going to bring Mission Impossible back. They've already moved that, guys, to 2025. So you're not going to see that come back again. So we'll have to see.
But we're going to see more stars in this building actually promoting these now, which will be lovely.
I'll be sharing elevators with some of these actors, and they can actually talk about their projects now, not just like
not that
cooking
podcast
and books.
you've never heard of. Yeah.
Tell us more about your podcast. All right. Thanks, Chloe. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, now let's get a check on your weather with Angie Lassman.
Yeah, Morning News Now weather forecast. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Another warm one is on tap for folks across the southeast. We've still got those temperatures running way warm for this time of year. Low 80s for Macon, Charlotte, Washington, D.C., even some spots like Washington, D.C. running above 20 degrees above normal. So these are really warm conditions that we're going to see for another day. Meanwhile, back behind that system, cooler than normal. We've got 50s across parts of Texas. Dallas going to hit the upper 60s today, and we've also got some rain for folks there. Meanwhile, up towards portions of New England, 45 in Boston, but we're dealing with some flurries and some snow and some icy mix that is working through that region here through the day today. As we look ahead to tomorrow, still warm for a sliver of the southeast, but some of that cooler air starts to work a little farther to the east, and then we kind of settle in to some more seasonal conditions as we round out the weekend and head into our Monday. D.C. goes from the upper 50s down to the low 50s by Sunday, so extra layers are going to be needed. Cincinnati, the upper 50s are where you end up by the time you get back into the work week. Low to mid 60s on tap for Nashville for any weekend plans that you may have. Now, that's the good news for some spots, but we've got some difficult news. We've got some climate news to talk about. According to Copernicus Climate Change Service, we have they're estimating that October is now the hottest on record. So 1.7 degrees above pre-industrial average. Really warm October across the globe. And on top of that, the last 5 months on record have been the hottest on record across the globe as well. That means that we are likely for the year of 2023 are going to be the hottest on record. Previously, or current, I should say, record is held by the year of 2016, also an El Nino year. But guys, the last 8 years have been the warmest 8 years on record as well. So really warm conditions are going to continue, likely with this El Nino year progressing. Now, meanwhile, locally, we've got some beneficial rain that's going to be possible across parts of the southeast. We've got a little bit of light snow here as we look ahead to Friday. That's going to leave us with some difficult conditions for driving, but otherwise great conditions for Saturday from the Midwest to the Northeast through the northern plains and even the desert. Going to see plenty of sunshine. It's the rain that sticks around for the Southeast that we'll have to deal with a little bit of that still lingering for our Sunday plans. But mild again, Savannah, for the Rockies.
Mild Rockies.
It's mild Rockies.
We're not getting more creative than that, Angie.
No, I tried. No time. Ran on time.
Mild says a lot.
I like
or very little. I don't know.
You're busy starting in the middle of the night. We get it. Angie, thank you very much.
Coming up, Americans have taken their credit card balances to record highs.
What's behind this worrying trend and what you can do to manage your finances? We'll help you out up next.
We're back now with a look at Americans' finances as we approach the holiday shopping season. New data shows Americans are digging themselves deeper into credit card debt, which is now hitting an all-time high.
For the first time ever, the total credit card debt across the U.S. has topped $1 trillion. That's a $154 billion spike from this time last year, and the largest increase in more than 2 decades.
For more on this, we're joined by Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Caleb, good to have you with us. So just what do you make of this staggering amount of debt? Break it down as to why we are seeing these higher credit card balances.
Yeah, we're big spenders, and this is the largest debt increase since 1999. Why? We've been spending a lot. We still have persistent inflation. It may be slowing, but prices are still high, and credit card APRs are north of 20%. So remember, credit card APRs, the interest you pay on your credit card, that's variable. So as the Fed has been raising interest rates so aggressively, 14 times, you see these credit card APRs go up, yet we keep spending into it, and debt is increasing. That's what we're seeing right now.
So as Joe mentioned, first I'd like to point out that you put it as we are approaching the holiday shopping season, because that's right. Nobody's needed to start yet. I certainly haven't. But people are going to start spending more. Actually, according to the National Retail Federation, people are going to be up with their spending, set to spend an average of $875 on gifts. I mean, what happens when you factor that into the already mounting debt?
Yeah, you're going to see more credit card debt. You're going to see more buy now, pay later usage. That is already up tenfold in just the last few years since they rolled it out. That is also another form of revolving consumer debt. So we are spending ourselves into debt. The savings rate, which was so high during the pandemic because a lot of people were getting checks from the government, that has gone from a high of about 14-15% to about 2 to 3%. So less savings, more spending at higher APRs. That's where you get this record debt.
I want to ask you more about buy now, pay later. That is becoming more popular. Basically, no fees, no interest. You usually have to pay back within 6 weeks, assuming you do pay it back within 6 weeks. How does that compare with credit cards? What are the pros and cons of going that way?
Well, the pros are the lack of interest on it, but a lot of people become very delinquent on BNPL, buy now, pay later services, and people usually with the lowest credit scores and the least ability to borrow use buy now, pay later. So it's a cyclical debt cycle that you get into if you don't pay these loans back. A lot of people turn to those, and a lot of people turn to their credit cards now, even if they have these high balances, because they don't want to not shop. We shop like it's our job here in this country.
Right. Give us some advice. How should you go about paying this down if you are sitting in some credit card debt?
Yeah, and a lot of people are. And when you have really high debt at a really high rate, you've got to call up your credit card company. They don't want to lose you. Believe me, as a customer, call them and negotiate a better rate. If they won't, other credit card companies would love to have your business consolidate under a lower interest rate. Or if you have to, take out a personal loan, wipe out the high credit card debt. Those loans are usually at a low rate, but you got to pay that too. So don't get yourself into this debt cycle where you're just borrowing from one thing to pay the other and never paying the big balance off. But that's the way to do it, and control the spending. It's really hard, especially going into the holiday season, but you have to retain that high interest credit card debt. Got to keep it low. That'll hurt your credit score in the long run.
I feel like once we get through the holidays, we're going to see people pulling back a little bit on spending. Does it seem like we're heading that way?
Probably, but you never know. With prices remaining high, people have a hard time reining it in. We'll see what happens.
All right. Caleb Silver, thank you so much.
Always great info. Thank you. Let's get you to international headlines now. Ukraine is taking responsibility for a car bomb that killed a Kremlin-backed politician.
NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter has that and other world headlines. Molly, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning to both of you. That's right. We are starting in Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine reported the assassination of a Russian-backed official in the occupied city of Luhansk. Mikhail Filipinenko has been active in the region's pro-Russian separatist movement since 2014 in Luhansk. Ukraine's military intelligence service immediately claimed responsibility and warned other Russian officials of similar retribution. Moving to Panama, for the last 2 weeks, anti-mining protests have taken over the streets in Panama, and this week they turned deadly. A chilling video shows an older man pulling out a pistol and opening fire. He was later arrested. 2 demonstrators were killed. But guys, the protests center on a new contract given to Canada's First Quantum Minerals to restart an open-pit copper mine for the next 20 years. Environmentalists there say the mine could seriously damage the area. It's surrounded by rainforests and pollute drinking water. We are keeping an eye on these protests. They are the largest we've seen there since the 80s. And finally, Japan has expanded another island to its long list of islands. Experts say a tiny island has emerged in the Western Pacific after a series of explosions that started last month. There is a type of volcanic explosion that results in the magma interacting with water, and it formed a landmass of about 100 meters in diameter. It's a small island, but still a new island, and it should be noted Japan also occasionally loses islands. This one could grow larger, change shape, but it could also disappear under the waves, we're told.
right.
Something you don't usually think of. All right.
No, definitely not. Molly Hunter, thank you so much. Coming up, a new weight loss drug is hitting the market soon.
Why something it could be the most effective and popular obesity drug out there. We got that story next. If you're one of the more than 50 million Americans suffering from chronic pain, you might be interested to hear about a new treatment that does not involve drugs. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff takes a closer look at a form of therapy that's being done in a whole new way, with patients seeing positive results.
I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand for any length of time without massive pain, so I pretty much did nothing.
It's been 25 years since Greg Whistler was able to lift a weight. His back pain started in high school following one too many rough hits on the football field. He says the pain never went away.
When you were having pain, were you able to sit down and do this like this?
No, I didn't work out at all, just because everything hurt. Even sitting in this position would hurt my back.
10 years ago, his pain was so excruciating, it landed him in the hospital. Doctors strongly encouraged surgery.
They all said that I needed my back fused because there was no cartilage left and the spine was displaced.
Whistler held off on surgery. He tried anything and everything to relieve his pain, from acupuncture to chiropractor visits to pain medicine. But 5 years ago, he learned about a new study with promising results in treating chronic pain without drugs.
I'd already decided I wasn't going to do surgery, and I didn't want to medicate my way through life. And so I replied to the study.
No surgery, no medication. Did you believe it was real?
No. I didn't know how it could be done.
Yoni Ashar is the lead researcher for the study at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus.
Where we saw these brain changes,
his program tackles pain with reprocessing therapy, or PRT. It's a groundbreaking method aiming to retrain the brain to conquer chronic pain. Doctors say even after an injury is healed, the brain continues to send pain signals to the body. But using a series of specific questions and psychological techniques, PRT helps the brain stop recognizing those signals.
Tell me when it starts. Tell me when it stops. Does it move? Tell me your pain history. How many chronic pain conditions have you had over the course of your life?
What you're describing sounds like talk therapy, not physical therapy.
Yes, it's physical therapy for the brain.
Greg Whistler went through 8 therapy sessions over 8 weeks. He says the results were life-changing.
I would give him colors or feelings or pulsing sensations or whatever. I would describe light, and literally it would just kind of dissipate. And then when you're done describing it, you're like, whoa, it's not there anymore.
And Whistler is not alone. Of more than 150 people undergoing 8 weeks of PRT, 98% of patients felt improvement, and 66% reported being nearly pain-free.
I am certain that there are people that are going to watch us talking about this and say, no offense, you're full of it. There's no way that this could be true.
Well, that's why we have data. That's why we do studies.
The researchers say even they were surprised by the results on MRIs.
So here's how pain was showing up in people's brains before treatment.
The red spots.
The red spots is where the pain was active, the pain was firing. But after treatment, there was a shift, and the pain basically shrunk and moved to different regions.
So this is after talk therapy?
After talk therapy.
And the next step, researchers believe when we're in pain, we usually avoid an active lifestyle because we're afraid. But this new therapy tells the person it's okay to exercise and be active, retraining the brain to get the body going.
People don't like when they're told it's all in your head. But isn't that kind of what you're saying here?
We're telling people it's all in your brain.
Before PRT, Whistler was reluctant to exercise.
I'd stopped walking, I'd stopped exercising, I'd stopped riding bikes, stopped riding motorcycles, stopped skiing, stopped doing all the things that I loved.
But now, 5 years after PRT, Whistler says he's lost 50 pounds and is back to doing the things he loves, pain-free.
I know in my life it has been transformational.
And our thanks to Jacob Soboroff for that report. Coming up, Swift mania is spreading overseas.
That is right. Taylor Swift is gearing up for the international leg of her record-breaking Eras tour. Details of that up next.
Back now at the latest financial headlines, starting with some disappointing news for Sony.
That is right. NBC Silvana now joins us. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning. Yeah, so Sony's profits slumping nearly 30% in the company's latest quarter. The electronics and media giant being hit by a weaker performance in its semiconductor chip business. Sony keeping its target to sell 25 million PlayStation 5 consoles this fiscal year as it looks for a boost from a new, slimmer version of the device. Sony selling nearly 5 million PS5s during the quarter. Mortgage rates seeing their biggest one-week drop in more than a year. Now, that led to the first increase in demand for home loans in a month. The average rate for a 30-year mortgage falling to 7.61% from 7.86% the previous week. However, that decline may still not be enough to offset sky-high home prices, which continue to rise due to a lack of listings on the market. And drivers wanted for the Hogwarts Express. ScotRail is advertising a new job listing for one of Scotland's most iconic railway lines, made famous by the Harry Potter films. The lucky candidate will work on the West Highlands line, which crosses the Glenfinnan Viaduct, which is featured often in the movies. No previous experience is needed. Applicants will be trained for up to 2 years. Starting pay is about $40,000 a year.
All right, pretty cool. Silvana, thank you so much. Well, we're back with a look at a new weight loss drug set to hit the market soon. Yesterday, the FDA approved Eli Lilly's Zepbound. Some analysts say they expect the medication to become the most popular drug ever sold. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
The revolution in weight loss treatment has already changed lives and given hope to the 1 in 3 Americans who are overweight. Now the FDA has approved a new drug for obesity, and it could end up being more effective than anything else on the market, including Wegovy and Ozempic. It's called Zepbound, made by Eli Lilly to treat obesity. The latest in a revolutionary class of weight loss drugs to get FDA approval. And it could be available to patients within weeks.
We're all extremely excited in the obesity community because it will be the most effective medication on the market.
In a phase 3 clinical trial, obese patients taking Zepbound lost about a quarter of their body weight over 72 weeks. That's about 52 pounds, with many only experiencing minor gastrointestinal side effects.
I hope that as it becomes available and used, patients will see the same benefits out there in the real world that we saw in our clinical trials.
It works by mimicking 2 hormones, one that helps curb appetite and reduce how much someone eats, and another which works to improve how the body breaks down sugar and fat. The medication called tirzepatide is already being sold as diabetes drug Mounjaro. 30-year-old Alexis Mitchell's doctor prescribed Mounjaro off-label after a health scare last year. She's lost 125 pounds so far. When you started taking Mounjaro, how quickly did the weight come off?
Immediately. I started the medication on a Friday. I got on the scale on Sunday. I was down 5 pounds.
Mitchell says she had to fight to get insurance coverage, despite a history of diabetes in her family. The price tag, over $1,000 a month. Zepbound will be equally expensive and not covered by all insurance plans. Earlier this year, I visited Eli Lilly headquarters in Indiana and spoke with the company's chief scientific officer. There are analysts who say it'll be the most lucrative drug ever made. Hyperbole?
Probably. What we try and focus on is, are we making medicines that treat a deep unmet medical need? And we think obesity and type 2 diabetes certainly are those large unmet medical needs.
Right now, Medicare does not cover obesity medications. There's legislation with bipartisan support proposed to change that, but it is stuck in Congress. If it passes, most other insurance companies would have a hard time denying coverage. Doctors say medications like these are necessary to prevent patients from having far more serious and expensive conditions caused by obesity. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie Goss, thank you so much. Well, tonight in Argentina, Taylor Swift is back on stage, kicking off this part of the international leg of her Eras Tour after a 10-week hiatus.
NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa joins us now with more on Swift's world domination. Emily, good morning.
Yes. It's been 74 days since we've last seen her on stage, but who's counting, right? And think of all she's accomplished since then. She dropped a new album, released a blockbuster movie, achieved billionaire status. Oh, in case you haven't heard, she has a new love interest, too. And now she's gearing up to take over 27 cities around the world.
It's been more than 2 months since Taylor Swift lit up a stadium stage. But today she returns to her record-breaking Eras tour, kicking off the global leg in Argentina, and fans are ready for it. Are you ready for it? For months, diehard Swifties in Buenos Aires have been camping out in shifts to secure a good spot on the stadium floor. Swift's international swing will include 27 stops over the next year, and her American fans are packing their bags. 43% of the Latin American tour tickets on StubHub have been purchased by U.S. residents.
I am so excited.
Like Sola Terez, who lives just outside of New York.
So explain to me how much money you say you saved by traveling to South America for this. A single ticket for the MetLife Stadium on resellers I was looking at nosebleeds for like $2,100 to $2,200. How much did your ticket cost in Argentina? $60. Wow. I paid $60 for 4 tickets in Argentina.
The Argentina show will be Swift's first concert since she was seen hand-in-hand with NFL star Travis Kelce. Swift has been in the stands cheering him on at Kansas City Chiefs games, and now he'll travel to Argentina to return the support, according to a source close to the couple. He played coy on the topic on his podcast with his brother this week.
My skin's getting real pale, so I got to go somewhere sunny.
South?
Somewhere south.
Someplace south?
Closer to the equator. I don't know if that's...
South of the equator?
Her return to the stage comes as the 12-time Grammy winner continues to rock the box office. The Eras Tour concert film raking in more than $230 million over just 4 weekends. And her superstardom showing no signs of slowing down.
And if you are planning the trip of your wildest dreams and looking to see Taylor abroad, a few things to keep in mind. Be on the lookout for special travel discounts on Travel Deal Tuesday. That's November 28th. Plan to book airfare and hotels at least 3 to 4 months in advance and try to fly midweek if you can. That can save you sometimes $100 or more.
Wow.
Now is an affordable time to go to Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that. It's not like it's peak season there.
Yes, exactly. There's some strategy involved here.
We'll see her in Europe, though, for a bit. All right, Emily, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, the life and times of Malcolm X.
Yeah, told in an opera. We're going to hear from the star and composer of the new opera about the activist and civil rights leader. That's our latest edition of Flipping the Script. We're back with our series Flipping the Script, featuring people on air, on stage, and behind the scenes, shining a spotlight on diversity. And this morning we are heading to the opera for a production called X, The Life and Times of Malcolm X. Late last week, it premiered at the Met Opera, 37 years after first premiering at the New York City Opera. X dramatizes 12 episodes from the life of the controversial civil rights leader, from his childhood growing up in poverty in Michigan to his assassination in New York in 1965, and so much more in between. This morning, we are joined by the opera's composer, Anthony Davis, and baritone Will Liverman, who plays Malcolm X in the production. Good to have both of you with us. I was able to see this the other night. Absolutely just a fantastic performance. I mean, Anthony, the story of Malcolm X has been told, obviously, many times in books. Many people remember the movie starring Denzel Washington a few years ago. Why an opera? Why tell this story in the form of an opera?
Well, I think Malcolm is a classic tragic hero. And when my brother was in a play playing El-Hajj Malik, and he told me, he said that there's so many references to music in the autobiography, and that would be great to do something with music, because in a way the parallel development of African-American music from the 40s to the 60s parallels the political developments and Malcolm's Odyssey. So it's very exciting for me to take Malcolm as this heroic figure who really traverses that time span, and also to tell the story of how to realize how his ideas are still relevant today.
You talk about the music for folks who maybe have like a small knowledge of opera or more traditional operas. The music's not what you would expect maybe from a typical opera.
Well,
right?
no, I think that the music draws from our culture. You know, I come out of engagement in improvisation and jazz, and that's a big part of the story, because in Malcolm's life, he was always around that music, and to see the music in the 40s, like Duke Ellington or Lionel Hampton, for example, and then getting to the 60s with John Coltrane and Miles Davis, is kind of to see that evolution of the music is reflected in the opera.
Will, as an experienced opera singer, you've done all the sort of traditional roles that maybe we expect from opera in a variety of language. What's it like to do something that's much more modern? What does it mean for you to be a part of this?
It's a tremendous thing, to say the very least. When I think about the impact of X, globally, what he's meant to me as a kid learning about X in school, and to be here on this stage and to tell this story, it's truly a tremendous honor. Yeah.
And it doesn't gloss over. I mean, it tells the real heart of the story, the good, the bad, everything that happens in between, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many, when you think about X and all of the transformations, he's had in his life, it really captures that in such a beautiful way. And each act focuses on, the evolution of his name, from Malcolm Little in Act 1, and then his transformation into Malcolm X in Act 2 with the Nation of Islam, and his, complete journey in Act 3 as El Shabazz. It's just tremendous.
I'm struck by the fact that in recent years at the Met Opera, we've seen productions like Champion, like Fire Shut Up in My Bones, now Malcolm X. And that means with this production, you're looking around you, and most everyone around you is a black performer. What does that mean to you? What do you think it means to people in the audience? What is the impact that has?
And so, I'm honored to be a part of this chapter in the Met where we're telling more stories by BIPOC composers. And, it's when I look back in high school, I went to the Met for the first time. And to think, to see a show like X as high school would be just, I would be blown away to see something like that. And to know that I'm a part of that legacy, going forward is, I'm really honored by it.
Anthony, I was struck there's a moment in the first act while the performance is going on, and on the screens up above we see a variety of names that people might recognize: Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Breonna Taylor. It reminds us that, yeah, this is something you wrote about 4 decades ago. It's about something that happened before that even, but this is very much a story that has a modern purpose, right?
Well, I think it exists in the present because the issues still exist. The brutality still exists, the racism exists. And even though some people in our society are trying to bury those things and forget it, but I think that, and also that Malcolm's solutions, Malcolm's ideas about how to approach that, this still lives on today. And so his legacy is still present. And I think what Robert O'Hara has brought out, the director, is that it also what it means to the future. As well.
And real quickly, we have less than a minute here, but the future is really a part of this. People might be struck by some of the imagery, very futuristic, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Well, no, it's great because that's what opera does. In us retelling this story, we're kind of using science fiction to kind of show Malcolm like what he would mean to people of the future, and just how big his legacy is. Thinking about his impact now and in the past and what it means, going forward. And the set design, the costumes, it's just really amazing to behold when you look at the big picture.
Visually, it's incredible. Yeah. Sci-fi opera, you get a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Anthony and Will. We appreciate it. There are still 6 live performances of the show left at the Met running through December 2nd. The November 18th performance will be transmitted live around the world as part of the Met Live in HD series. And that is going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.